Hi everyone, I'm Marianne, the Artsy Crafter. Welcome to my channel. Do you love using textured papers in your journals when you're making journals? I know I do. I absolutely love textured papers. The more textured, the better. The more unusual, the better. I like it. I absolutely love anything to do with paper, stationery, art supplies, you name it. So the downside is that finding textured papers or specialty papers I find is quite difficult sometimes, and also when you do find them, they can be quite expensive, and it's something you can't download as a digital either. So I've resorted to making some of my own digital papers. Some of these techniques you would have seen lots of times before, I'm sure, in other people's videos. So I just wanted to bring together a few of the ones that I like to use, and also I will also show you some new techniques that I'm trying out. I'll show you how to make some of these some other textured papers, and then once they've dried, I'll come back and I'll show you how they turned out when they dry. And then I'll also show you some examples of how I've used some of these papers in my journals. So let's get started. So this one here is actually what I call faux textured paper, because it's actually not textured paper. It's just copy paper that I've actually used some watercolors on, and then I've used a sponge and I've just sponged a texture on there so it looks like it is textured, but it's not. So that's one way, you know, if you like the look of texture but you don't really want to have actual texture on your pages, this is a good alternative to use. So that's the first one there. This one here is some dictionary paper. It's very thin and delicate, and I loved doing this technique on this paper. These are both the same paper, but turned out very differently. So all I did was scrunched up the paper and then unscrunched it. Some I've left scrunched up, as you can see here, so you can actually pull it apart more if you really want to. And this one here I've just flattened out a lot more, and then all I've done is I've just used some watercolors on here and highlighted with some gold paint, and I don't think it'll pick up on the camera, perhaps it will, but that yes, I love this paper. It's absolutely gorgeous and it has a beautiful feel. Using watercolors on here kind of gives you a silky feel to the paper. I don't know why, because I haven't put any fixative over the top of that. I've just left it natural. So that's that one. And this one here, the same. I've just used watercolor papers, watercolor paints on here, and then highlighted in gold. And I love the grungy look to this one. Absolutely gorgeous. The next one is, these are all, so these ones here, that was thin dictionary paper. This one here is just your ordinary thickness copy paper or printer paper. And all I've done the same thing. I've just scrunched them up and unscrunched them, and then usually I do that a few times. I'll scrunch them in different directions and unscrunch them again, or flatten them out again. Sometimes I flatten out a lot, sometimes I flatten out not quite so much, and it gives you these different textures every time, which I absolutely love. So this one here is I've just sponged over some coffee dye with a sponge, and so it actually bleeds through to the back of the paper, and I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. And this one here, I've just I think I sprayed some coffee dye on the top here, perhaps before I scrunched it up, and then I highlighted with some gold paint, and you can see the coffee dye actually bled through to the back a little bit. So either side, I think it looks beautiful. Gives you some of that. So that's those two. This one here is the same technique. I just scrunched up copy paper, sorry, and then I've used some watercolors on there, and where the watercolor has gone into the creases or the ridges, it's just left that kind of marble effect. And here you can see where I've pulled some of the paper flatter, and you can see the background color has come through there. So that's something I can, you can experiment a little bit more. If you wanted more of this effect on there, you just leave the ridges or folds. Actually, they're folds in the paper, so you leave the folds as they are, and then do your painting. And then once it's dried, you can pull it out and flatten it out, and you'll get that beautiful effect on your paper. And it even went through to the back. I don't know whether I painted the back or not, but it bled a little bit through to the back, or I might have just put some color on the back there. I can't quite remember. It's quite a while ago since I did this page. I absolutely love this page, this paper. And also, you don't have to always use, none of those are art papers. So far, so this one here is some baking paper. I love working with baking paper. So these are two different effects that I got on baking paper to give texture. This one here I sprayed with coffee dye paper, and I just let it pool, the coffee dye. I sprayed quite a bit on there, and when it pooled, it gave you this beautiful pattern on there, some beautiful texture. Once again, it's not the texture that's in the surface, but the texture in the pattern. And it also went through to the back. So you can not just use coffee dye, but you can use all kinds of watercolors or inks on this baking paper. You can use tracing paper, will do the same thing. So that's that one. And this one here is that dictionary paper again here. So that's just what bled onto the back. I didn't do anything to the back. But on the front here, I actually sprayed on coffee dye, and then I used textured paste, I should say, and a stencil. I actually used two different stencils, and I stenciled the texture onto the page. And when I did that, I used white texture paste, and some of that coffee dye bled into the white texture paste. So it's patinaed with coffee dye color, which I absolutely love. Which it looks much whiter on the camera than it does on the actual page. And then, of course, there are different techniques you can use to change the texture of your paper altogether. This here is a faux leather that you can make, and this is just some copy paper once again. All I did was scrunch it up, and I actually used a little bit of, I think I used a little bit of glue with some dishwashing liquid or some bathroom soap, and I scrunched it all up and pulled it out again, scrunch it up and pull it out again, and I left it to dry, and it gives you this beautiful leather effect. The exact recipe I don't have on me at the moment, but I'm sure all you have to do is Google it or find a video to show you exactly how to do this technique. It's been a while since I've done it, so I'm not quite remembering exactly what steps, but that was the basic steps that I used. And then once it's dry, I did a bit of coffee dyeing first, and then I used different colored browns that I painted on and rubbed off, and then this one I highlighted in some black paint, left it to dry, and yes, so this one I made into a little booklet here. I stitched around the edges, and I actually made a little pamphlet type thing with two side pockets here, and I backed it with some book page, and I sewed around the edge here, so, and put the little closure on the front. So that's with that. So as I said, you don't have to always stick to paper. Other things you can use is things like, this is just ordinary tissue paper, you know, the tissue paper that you blow your nose with, that kind of tissue paper. And all I did was I coated it in some glue, and I just squished it up and I let it dry, and you can see the ridges. You can see that it's still the natural color of the tissue paper behind, and you can see there behind how it's all scrunched up. And then I just use some I use watercolors or acrylic paints, I can't remember which one I used, on top, and gives you a beautiful finish like that. And because these are all done the same way, to give you different effects here, and some green, and it gives you that wood texture here. This one's like, it's more like wood texture. You can manipulate it to look more like wood texture if you want, like I've done here. There's a bit of a knot in a tree, so that's just ordinary tissue paper. So that's that one. And then also you have some more tissue paper here. This is actually napkin paper, one ply. I just pull the plies apart. There's a two ply, so I pull the plies apart. You don't have to do that. You can keep it two ply, but when you start painting, the two plies can separate. So that's why I've just left it at one ply. Here I've just used stenciled and a brush. If I can find the brush. One of these brushes, these makeup brushes, these fine bristle makeup brush, and stencil it and just gently brushed on the watercolor. I use watercolor. You can use inks if you wish. And then this one here, once it dried, I just went over at the top with some gold paint like that. So that's ordinary napkin paper. So that's that. And then this here is actually paper towel I've used. I'll show you this one first. This is paper towel. I just tore up into these strips like this, and I just glued them all together. And you can see there's no backing on there. I just glued them all together, and I use PVA glue because I don't trust glue sticks. Most of them don't stick permanently, so I just use a bit of watered down PVA glue and made sure I put it on a piece of plastic like this and glue them all together so I can move it away and let it dry. I just let it dry naturally, and then I just used my watercolors, bit of coffee dye, watercolors, and just did a wash over the top to get that color. And as you can see, it bled through to the back, so you could use the back as well. So that's why I did that one. This one here, once again, I did the same thing, except this time I used gold paint that I think I brushed it on, gold paint on some of them, and then I tore out the strips afterwards. You can see here that gold there, and I tore out the strips. I inked around the edges, and then I glued that onto another panel of paper towel. This one here was colored, so I've joined two together because it wasn't long enough. You could put it on some copy paper or anything else you wish, baking paper even, and use that to make pockets. You can decorate different colors and whatnot, so that's that. Here it's gone a little bit flat, but I actually cut out circles and made a little flower, fabric flower here. You can see there, it's quite pretty. Do it in different colors, and then you can go ahead and put a little pearl or a button or something in the center of the flower, and it's quite doesn't take up too much thickness on your page. So that's just another idea to use the paper towel. so you don't always have to use paper to get some textured papers. Here is some tea bags. So once again, I just stenciled these images onto a tea bag using this brush here. I find it works best. It doesn't tear, and the images don't bleed. So that's just some different ideas there. Yeah, these ones I actually use watercolors on and made a background, and this one here I just made a little painted a little tree on there. Hold on up to the camera, you can see them a little better. So they're just some ideas for you to look at. Maybe you want to do those techniques in your own journals. So that's those. And now I will show you some examples of how I've used these papers in my journals. Here I've used it as a flip up, and I've just added some gold braid at the top, rubbed some gold paste on the sides, and I stamped some butterflies on the panel. A sample of where I've used a tea bag on page. Here I've just used that one that I painted blue and green background there with a bit of yellow, and I painted a tree with some leaves and two little birds there, and that's just a decorative panel on this panel that I made there. In the little journal here, I've actually used the tea bag to make a pocket. Here I've sewn it onto this pocket panel here, and it's been stamped on. That's that one. This one here is another flip up. This where once again I've used that background and I just painted a tree, and that's a flip up. Another piece of fabric panel on the top there. Here's on the front of the journal, this is where I've scrunched up a piece of decorative paper, and then I just highlighted the ridges with I did a little bit of inking around the edges, and then I highlighted the ridges with some gold paint there. I also did the same on the inside here with the butterfly paper. Here is where I've used texture paste and a stencil, and I've made a tag. Just highlight it with a bit of bronze paste. Is that one there? Here's more of that on a whole panel with the stencil on the dictionary paper. And that one. Here is where I've used tissues, just plain old tissues, and I've scrunched them up, and I've made a tree in the shape of a tree. And then I did that first and let it dry, and then I painted it up first, and then I glued it onto this page as a tree. Here is where I use the baking paper. I've just left it as the coffee dyed paper, and I've made an envelope out of that. Here's where I've used that orange scrunched up paper, and I've used it as a side pocket on a journal. Here's where I've used some lace. I've actually glued lace onto a book page that's been coffee dyed, so that becomes a belly band. So I didn't paint the lace, I just left it as is because it had like a vintage colouring to it. Here's where I've used decorative tissue paper. It was 2-ply. I took off the back ply and I glued the front ply onto a book page, and then over the back here I actually used paper towel, and I just painted the back, painted the green and pink watercolors onto the back in a mottled effect, and then I did some stamping on the top. I tore it out in this shape, and then I got some gold paint and went around the edges, highlighted the edges, and then glued this onto this panel. And that's it. That's just a couple of examples that I can show you in some of the journals that I've used. There's plenty more of examples that where you can use these papers, so go ahead and try some of these for yourself. I have a few more that I want to try out, so I'll see how I go with those, and if I do any good with those ones, I'll come back and I will show you. So for now, that's all for that. I'm now going to show you just a few techniques that you can use to make some textured papers. First of all, I'm going to use some PVA glue to glue just some regular cotton thread onto a page. Once the glue is dried, I then apply a coat of matte medium over the top just to seal it all in. I'm now going to repeat this process, but this time I'll be using a thin ball of wool. In this next one, I'm going to use some gauze fabric on the page. I'll cut it out to size and then glue it to the page. And then once that glue's dried, again I'll apply a coat of matte medium. For this next one, I'm going to use some thick crochet cotton, but this time I will make a pattern, a crisscross pattern, so I'll make it go lines across the page and then down the page, and then this time I will sandwich this between two sheets of copy paper. This is what it looks like once everything's pressed down. You get that pattern. For the next one, I will be applying a one-ply napkin over the top of a sheet of copy paper, and then, as I've done previously, I will wait for the glue to dry and then apply a coat of matte medium. For this last one, I will be applying a piece of synthetic lace onto a piece of copy paper. Then once that's dry, I will go over the top with matte medium once again to seal it all. So that's those, and now I will show you some of the papers that I showed you how to add some texture. This is the one we use the just ordinary cotton on, ordinary sewing cotton, and then I'll show you an example of how I used this in a journal. Here is a sample of where I've used cotton on a page. This is embroidery cotton that I just glued on in this stripe pattern, and I just punched some circles out of some yellow paper in different sizes and then glued that over the top. It's for a decorative effect. And then on this page here, move these leaves aside, I've actually sewn a pattern, texture pattern onto a page there with the sewing machine. It's there, and then at the back here I've used it on the page here where you can pick up those gold threads. I just gathered a bunch of gold thread, and then I glued it onto, ran it through some liquid glue, and then I spread it out over the page and left it to dry. This is a pocket, so that's that one. And this one here, I've actually used it as a border there, as a frame, some different threads. And this is the fine wool, ball of wool that I used on this one here. And this is the one where I just put it on the page and glued it down. So that's how that finished off. It's quite sturdy. When you got the glue on, it doesn't move. So I can imagine you could actually use this on a colored background or a decorative background, and you could just leave it plain. Whatever colors, this is just a light gray, but you could use all kinds of colors to make your background. So you don't have to just use this color on a white background. You could do it on different backgrounds and on different papers. So I haven't actually, this is a new technique for me. I haven't actually used this before, so perhaps I'll be using this in a future in a journal. So that's that one. And this is the same one, the wool again, that I actually sandwiched between two pieces of copy paper. So that's how it looks textured. So you imagine painting over the top of that and highlighting some of those ridges. Or once again, you could just use decorative papers to start with. So that's that one. This one I was really excited to use. This is that thick crochet cotton, and we made a pattern. And this one I will definitely be using this one very soon, because I have a interesting idea how to use this pattern. You know, you could use book page, you could use decorative papers, you could do a collage and then sandwich it, the cotton in between. There's all ways you could use this texture here. So just look out for that one in a future video. Using that. This one here is the tissue paper. So I just glued onto the page. You can see the texture there. So you can have fun with that. You can paint it up. Once again, you can put it on different colored backgrounds and then paint over the top. So that's that one. And then this one here, this is that gauze that we use on the page. So once again, there's all kinds of ways you could use this in your journal. Decorate it up. And then this is the one that we did with salt. So this, the glue glues it down. Not much of the salt escaped. And I'm not quite in love with this texture. It feels like rough sandpaper. But so I don't know whether I would actually use that, but it's an idea. Maybe something can use it for down the track. I much prefer this one, where I sandwiched the salt between the two pieces of copy paper, and I like the texture of that much better. It's less rough on your hands for one thing, and it does give a nice texture. It's looks like a being quilted on. I'm going to have fun testing how this can work in a journal. And that's those. And then this is the lace that I glued on to just some copy paper. And this one you could, if you could put it on something thicker if you want to, or but I think copy paper is sturdy enough to actually you could use that on a journal cover, or make a little brochure or booklet out of it, and then you could just add another decorative panel on the other side, and it would make a nice soft covered journal. Of course, you don't have to use plain copy paper. You can use decorative papers, or you could actually paint over this so that you'll get a different effect on there. I'm not quite sure. This is what do you call it? Synthetic lace. It's not cotton lace, so I'm not quite sure how it would take to paint or ink. I'll have to test that out, but I'll have fun testing this out. So you should try this for yourselves and then experiment. That's half the fun of making these papers, is to experiment and see what you come up with. Sometimes they turn out, sometimes they don't. Now, lastly, I've got a couple other ones that I did a while ago, but I haven't done anything with, but I thought I'd show you them anyway. This is the same as the string technique that I did before, or with the crochet cotton, but this time I've just used some of that string. It's just ordinary household string. It's got a, I think it's a 3-ply string to use. It's a little bit thicker than the crochet cotton, so it gives you a bit more texture. So I just put it in there just to see how it would turn out, and you could paint that up and use that in multitude of different ways in your journals. This one here is actually some gauzy lace material that I got, and I just put it between 2 sheets of that baking paper, and you can just about see the texture on that. So I'll be interested to see how this turns out when I paint it up and use it, so that I hope to show you that in an upcoming video where I use this in one of the journals. So, and then lastly, this is that what do you call it, this is the tape that they use to put gyprock, is it gyprock, or the internal walls in a house, and they join the 2 panels together with this stuff. It's got a sticky background, and it's a plastic here. Sometimes they use paper. In the old days, I think they used paper to join the 2 together, and then they plaster over the top of that. So that's that, and that gives you a bit of texture, like a checkered texture. I don't know if you can see that or not, but anyway, I thought I put it between 2 pieces of copy paper just to see how it if the texture would come through or not, but you can just do it on the top, and then you could do all kinds of things to decorate that. So that's just some of the papers I've shown you today. There's tons of others. I hope I've given you some inspiration to try out some of these texture papers yourself, to make them for yourself and have fun creating different, decorating them in different ways and using them in your journal. We don't have to stick to just normal papers or digital papers or just book pages or whatever papers that are available. We can make our own papers. Being junk journalists, we're used to being creative, I hope. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling on today. I hope you enjoyed watching today and that you get some inspiration and go off and try it for yourself. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon in the next video. Have a great crafty day, everyone. Bye-bye.